It's TRB Reviews, part of the Real Brian Show. We've been talking about doing full spoilery reviews of movies and TV shows that we're watching. You know, maybe some music, games we're honking, all that good stuff. But today, we are diving into The Matrix Resurrections. Let's rock it! Yeah, welcome to TRB Reviews. This is part of the Real Brian Show. Thank you for joining us. And, you know, hey, I like it. It's like, hey, we're the Real Brian Show, but we were like, we got to split off. We got to talk about movies and TV shows. We got to spoil them. We got to get deep into them. We can't do that on our Friday episodes because not everybody's seen them, and that's okay. And so they're like, well, I have to skip part of your show, you know, so we're keeping our little recommendations on our normal Friday episodes as non-spoilery. Check them out if you want to. This is where we go, all right, we saw this. We have to talk about this. Let's dive in and let's get spoilery and let's get deep. So, Captain, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, how you doing?
Dude, I'm great, man. It's good to be here, and it's the mate. Oh, wait. So check this out. So first of all, if you look behind Captain Influence there, he's got the Matrix poster. Obviously a Matrix fan. And I'm going to be doing something here. So I actually bought these glasses way back when the Matrix came out.
Oh, nice.
Those are like Neo's glasses.
Yeah.
So if you put those on, you remember that? I don't know why I kept them. It's just I found them in a drawer and I thought, no way, they're still alive.
Awesome.
You know?
Wow,
So
you
here
look
we
awesome.
go.
That's cool.
Those are my Neo glasses. I might just have to leave these on the
jealous.
whole time. So I can't believe I kept them, dude. These are 20-something years old now, man. I think I got them in the early 2000s. So
it would have been more interesting if you gotten Morpheus's sunglasses that he pinches onto his nose.
You know how many times like we all went, we want those, man. We can't find those anywhere. They didn't exist.
Dude, do you remember when the original Matrix came out in '99? How popular that Nokia phone was?
My gosh, the Switchblade,
like the Switchblade one.
Yeah.
And I think I heard even back then that it existed, but it was really hard to find.
It's true.
And the model they used in the movie was like designed specifically for that movie.
Yeah.
So
and then those phones went.
Boy, that was cool back then.
Quickly out of date, man. It's just crazy. I do love how they mentioned this, and let's just dive into the review here. We're gonna have some fun. First of all, with this, we're talking about one thing. We're gonna dive in. We're gonna have fun. But one of the things I loved is when they were talking about, you had to find a landline in order to exit the Matrix or enter the Matrix. They're like, yeah, we don't have to do that anymore. Some of the old technology they had. I was like, I'm really glad they addressed that too, because they're trying to keep it somewhat in real time with our actual reality and all that. So that was really cool.
Funny.
All right. So what did you think of the actual movie itself? Let's just do a quick overview, each of our thoughts. I'm curious.
Yeah. So I have to say it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it wasn't a great movie either. I had to see it twice to really start to understand what they were trying to do with the plot.
Yeah.
And the second watch was a little more satisfying than the first, which I was very happy with.
Okay, good.
I was gleaning more details from that second watch through, but it took an online synopsis and analysis to really show me what they were trying to do with the plot. And that was invaluable. Once I read that, I was like, oh. So after reading that online synopsis and analysis, I can much more appreciate where they were trying to do with this movie than I did just watching it twice. So,
and that's assuming that the synopsis is accurate.
Yes.
We
so
hope
some of it might have been open to interpretation, but the one that we're going to link in the details below was really, really articulate and very detailed, and it rang true. So
okay. Now I have not had a chance to read it because you just told me about it right before we started the show. So I will read it late. Here's what I'm going to do, because I've only seen the movie once. I'm going to read that and then go watch the movie again to see what else I pick up, because you're right. In fact, there was an interview with, I believe it was Lana Wachowski in 2005. Our movies are intended to be not for a passive viewer. We want them to be intelligent. We want you to think. We want you to actually kind of, try to figure some stuff out, assuming that, they kept with that intention, then there's a lot more behind this movie than I think we noticed on the first watch. Because, my first thing was, I didn't know what the heck was going on at times. I mean, it's like, okay, I know what's going on here. I know what's going on here, but why is this happening? Was that an accident? Is that intentional? Was it poor writing? Was it genius writing? But I'm in the same boat. Like, I enjoyed the movie. I had fun. There was nothing about the movie where I just was like, I actually enjoyed it. I had a good time. But I mean, I'm comparing it to the original trilogy, and of course, especially the original movie, and nothing compares to the original movie at all. Even the second and third one weren't even nearly as good. So, you know, you look at this and you just go, yeah, it was fun. It was good. It's worth watching as a Matrix fan, but was it needed? My first response was not at all. But after you're talking about that synopsis, actually, maybe it was, and maybe it opens itself up to the next set of trilogy.
I respect what Lana Wachowski may have said back then about, you know, they want their movies to be more cerebral and to be not, you know, not all surface, but at the same time, I mean, yes, the original Matrix was not all surface, but it filmed like a surface movie. And what I mean by that is anybody who watched it came out of that movie going, "Holy cow, that was amazing!" Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, almost literally everybody who watched it went, "I can't believe that just happened." This movie, that I mean, the reviews are playing on this. That did not happen on this movie. So I feel like they somehow failed to. I don't know if they were trying to shove too much information in too short a time, and it wasn't a short movie. I don't think it was written well enough to cover all that they should have explained to make it a, you know, a full-blooded movie like the first movie was. So
yeah, so
you know,
either it was poorly written, or let me rephrase that. It wasn't as well written, or it was too deep for us to understand on a first pass.
Right. Yeah, I definitely gleaned a lot more. I listened harder on the second watch. I got more details out of that, but then I read that synopsis and I was like, oh. I mean, it was just everywhere. It was just, wow, this is really good. So, I mean, the synopsis was really good. So,
sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, and let's get the elephant out of the way too. You know, everybody's been asking what was up with Hugo Weaving reprising his role as Agent Smith. Where was he? You know, where was Lawrence Fishburne doing Morpheus? Basically, what I have read is Hugo literally just had a scheduling conflict. He was trying to make it both work, and Lana was like, nah, we're just going to keep going with our timeline, and it just didn't work out.
Okay.
That's unfortunate. Now, granted, the guy that played Agent Smith in this movie was really, really good. He did an amazing job, did a really good job recreating it, but, you know, I missed Hugo. One thing I was going to say, too, obviously, you know, you remember the Oracle from the first and also the second movie. And then, you know, unfortunately, that actress died in between the filming of the second and the third one. And so they had to get a different actress. They did a really good job with explaining that as well. Yeah. And it makes sense because she's code. So it's like, well, the code changed. Okay, cool. And then they had this whole little cool explanation around that. They could do that with Agent Smith. Why not? You know? So it was a good answer. Now with Lawrence, he said, and here's the quote, you'd have to ask Lana Wachowski why, because I don't have an answer for that. Well, he was not asked to come back at all. Now there are a lot of speculations out there that with The Matrix Online, he died in that. There was also some stuff kind of hinted at, I think, and maybe I missed this, but I believe it was very hinted in the movie that the destruction of Zion, Morpheus went with that.
Right.
But
it was hinted, yeah.
I don't remember them actually saying he's dead. It's just because they did say something like, oh, I'm recreated in the machine world. I have all of, you know, Morpheus's memories, but what happened to the original Morpheus for sure? They didn't really say that.
I feel like that might have been either stated or strongly hinted by Niobe when she was with Neo, looking at the statue of Morpheus in Io that they had erected.
You know, and that guy did a great job as Morpheus as well. It's like, it's kind of well, if he died, why couldn't they recreate him again? And it's kind of like, well, Neo and Trinity died and they recreated the same actors and, you know, worked out. So yeah, I don't know. There's something else there that we just don't know, I think.
Right. There probably is some behind the scenes stuff, but they do a great job of explaining it as to why Morpheus is a different guy. It's because the Morpheus in this movie was coded by the new Neo, the new Thomas Anderson in the new Matrix, as the gaming designer that he is, the famous gaming designer. He was coded into what did they call that? It's like
modal.
a modal. It's like a miniature version of the Matrix that they use to that is used to evolve programs, quote unquote. And so that Morpheus was part of Neo's modal at his company to kind of run simulations on what happened in the game, but in the background he was also the character was trying to come to terms with the dissonance in his head between, because something was wrong in the back of his head, that he knew something was off. Anyway, yeah. So they explained it all to my satisfaction. With that explanation, it makes more sense for it to be a different actor than it would to somehow recreate a young Lawrence Fishburne. So,
well, I'm glad they didn't do that. He's old. You know, like you said, that the overall response to the movie was not amazing. But why don't we point out some of the positives first? Let's go into that.
Yeah.
What do you think? So one of the things I loved, they did a really, really cool job, especially in the beginning with, now they've always done this, the reflections. So, you know, in the first movie, you know, when they've zoomed in on Morpheus's face and he's holding out, you know, a pill in one hand and a pill in the other hand, and each of his lenses is showing each hand. They did an amazing job, you know, with the cinematography with that. They did some of that, like reflections. So it's like, here's what the character sees, but here's what other people see. The Agent Smith reflection. There were a few, you know, cool things to kind of be paying attention to. And I know I missed some of them. So that's where I want to go back and rewatch again and looking for that. There were a lot of Easter eggs, of course, a lot of nostalgia on one. Okay. So this is kind of a mixed review. I loved the nostalgia, and then it started to get a little heavy, kind of like you're relying too much on the nostalgia of the trilogy to give us the feels. And it's like, give us something new too. Like, that's cool. I love that, you know, but give us something new. Give me something to not, I don't want to rely on the feels. Kind of like Ghostbusters Afterlife, you know, cool.
Right.
Don't want to rely on that. We want to have some fun. We want to see something new. So that's one positive. What's positive for you?
Well, and to mention Ghostbusters briefly, the thing about that movie was that they did all that with the nostalgia, but then, to be honest, Ghostbusters was even more overdoing the nostalgia, because I mean, look at the end of that movie. They kind of recreated the end of the first movie with different characters, but for some reason it worked. In this case, again, I think their biggest failing was just communicating what was going on succinctly to the audience. I mean, they really, the movie really does rely on you seeing it over and over again. To nail down certain positives, that's difficult for me. I mean, it's hard for me to. I'm on the spot now. I don't.
I can share another one.
No, yeah, go ahead. I tell you guys that I enjoyed the movie, but then again, I can't nail down specific positives. I can throw negatives at you all day long.
No, but that's very interesting, because that goes back to, like, you know, when we were talking about the first movie. Now, we were both of the age where we had the privilege of being able to see the first movie when it actually came out. And I mean, it changed the face of movies and how movies were done and stuff like that. And then a lot of people copied them for a long time, and, you know, but that's old school now. So it's like, but I mean, everything. I mean, you're just constantly talking about all the amazing stuff that happened in that movie. And in this movie, we didn't have that as much. So I get that.
I'd say a positive for me was the soundtrack. You know, it was so similar to the original. It really tied it in with the original trilogy. They didn't go anywhere really weird, in my opinion, on the soundtrack. So that was a good thing.
It was similar, but it was still new, and they had a couple things. Again, that's another thing that I want to kind of go listen to, because, you know, that first soundtrack was also very iconic. Oh, it was really, really good. Yeah. A lot of great music in it.
And I'm referring to the score more than the soundtrack. Real honestly, the soundtrack.
Yeah, I'm thinking both.
If you buy the Matrix, if you buy the Matrix soundtrack, it's one hit song out, or one not hit song. It's one awesome song after another. Yeah. But the score is what I was referring to. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, even the score in the first one was very. It was very iconic as well, and it's become that way, you know. And this one was good too, but I didn't. Here's the thing: I didn't notice it as much, which. That's a positive and a negative. You know, the negative is that it didn't impact me as much as the first movie did. The negative, or the positive, is though, is that it wasn't as annoying as the Mandalorian soundtrack. I'm sorry. For those of you who have been listening to us with the Mandalorian, I've never been a big fan of that soundtrack, but that's okay. Some people love it. One thing though that I was really surprised about, like, this really actually surprised me, because you know that in the first movie especially, the actors had to learn martial arts. They talked about the training and the time that it took them to learn the art, so that it wasn't relying on CGI and stunt people. Like, it was actually Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss and, you know, Lawrence Fishburne, all those guys. So it's neat to see that, you know, they put so much into that. It didn't look like they did that very much in this movie. In fact, I thought the fighting in general was okay. You know, okay, yeah. The first movie and parts of the second movie, the fighting was just unbelievable. And in this movie, it was like, eh. And then the other thing that was interesting, maybe you mentioned, or maybe you saw this, is that there wasn't a lot of fighting at all. In fact, there's this weird thing where Neo's like force pushing constantly, and
near the end of the movie, especially. Yeah,
it's just like intense, where he's like throwing his whole body into this. And then I remember, back in the first movie, and even in the second movie, the scene with all the weapons on the wall, in the big staircase, and they're all like, oh, I'll handle them. You'll handle us, kill him. And then he just goes like that, or it's like, I think he had his thumb out like that. And he just literally just does that, and the bullets come at him and then just stop, and then he just does that. That's it. And then he proceeds to have this amazing martial art fight.
Right.
And then in this one, it's like he doesn't, he barely fights at all, if anything, and he's really throwing his whole body into it. And so I'm thinking like, okay, this is what gets me thinking, like, why is this going on? Is that an oversight? Probably not, but it's like, is it because, Trinity's now the one and Neo's not? Is it because he's older and he's less trained? Is it because he doesn't really fully believe like he did in the first trilogy? Is it bad writing? Does it have anything to do with the story? I don't know, but it got me thinking about that kind of thing. Like, he can still do certain things, but he does not look nearly as powerful. Clearly can't fly either. Trinity died. We know that. We assumed that
before Neo did.
Yeah, we assumed that Neo died in the third one, but it was never 100% confirmed that he did. We just assumed that he did because they carried him off and that was it. But we never saw anything else. So was he actually truly they talked about that these two were recreated. But then again, was he recreated or was he just repaired? And so it's like the way we see some of that stuff in there is that they're actually repairing his eye and they're repairing his body, which means, okay, they didn't recreate him from scratch, but Trinity was fully dead. We know that. So there's some mystery there as far as, are we supposed to know that yet? Who knows? But if he truly is still the same Neo, then wouldn't he have the same powers? Wouldn't he still be able to fly once he was kind of like, oh yeah, we're good now? And then this also begs the question, if, Trinity, she's the one, she can fly, but Neo can't, but whatever. So why is it that, Trinity's like, I'm nothing. I'm just this, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay. I woke up. Oh, now I can fly. And you're kind of like, wait a minute. It took Neo an entire movie, however long, that was as far as real time and all that, to realize like, I have to believe, I have to free my mind and let go. And now I get it. Oh, now I can fly. Now I can do all this stuff. But it wasn't just like, I just, decided to think and all of a sudden now I can fly. I felt that was a little cheaply done with Trinity.
Yeah, I agree. At least it appears to be when you watch when you watch Resurrections.
Yeah.
What happened in general? So the movie takes place 60 years after Episode 3, and in general, one faction of the machines somehow reincarnated both Neo and Trinity into new bodies that they were using in a new version of the Matrix, run by a new architect called the Analyst, played by Doogie Howser, aka Neil Patrick Harris, MPH.
Yep.
And then a rogue group of people in the real world, 60 years later, aimed to rescue both Neo and Trinity back into the real world again to make them into a super team of the one. That's my summary of the plot of this movie.
Okay.
The new Matrix, the Analyst was trying to utilize the special power that those two had together to run the new Matrix. Somehow it's all very, and I think he explained some of that. The Analyst explained some of that in the actual film. At the end of the third movie, when they made peace, and when the architect and the Oracle are sitting on that bench at the end talking, the architect says that this peace isn't going to last, and she says we'll make it last as long as we can, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, the peace doesn't last, and what happens is the machines that made peace agreed to let anyone in the Matrix who wanted out to let them out, and including programs. But then so many people were wanting out that it created a power shortage. Another faction of machines went to war with that faction, and they were fighting each other. And they show that in the movie. They mentioned it briefly, that they went to war together, and Niobe couldn't, she'd never seen anything like that before.
Yeah. And it's interesting talking about the Matrix in general. It would have been the second movie, I think, is when the architect, the ergo concordantly vis-a-vis, he was mentioning that the very first iteration of the Matrix was too perfect. It's kind of like humans realize that, they need problems and trouble and pain and all that good stuff.
Oh,
and
yes.
So, yeah, they mentioned that, right? Because so then that's when they created a less perfect version of the Matrix, and yet people tried to get out. Well, interestingly enough, this current iteration of the Matrix that we're seeing in Matrix Resurrections is even that much less perfect, which I found to be very interesting because the analyst, Neil Patrick Harris, was mentioning all of these cool little quotes. And I pulled out two of them, which I thought was really cool. But one of them was, humans are always quietly yearning for what you don't have while dreading losing what you do have. And I was like, that's so true in humanity. And then they talked about, for 99% of your race, this is the definition of reality, whether it's in the Matrix or not. Like, this is how you define reality. And so clearly people aren't trying to get out of the Matrix. And you saw that. They weren't trying to get out as much in this current iteration as they were in the other one because it just felt perfect and comfortable.
That was what the analyst was using Trinity and Neo's bodies for, their psyches and their bodies for was it was fear and desire. Those were the two. Those were the two emotions that were strong in those two because they were the one, or they're a pair. I guess the synopsis kind of indicates that they are a single unit. They're like a pair. They go together. Which was implied in the first three movies.
Well, and they show this in the movie in this one too, where it's showing this is the in-between time, I don't even know what it was. It was the weirdest thing. It's like they would come together and would fight the machines, but I'm like, we never saw that. So wait, when did this happen? And because they talked about that actually, about how whenever you two joined together, things would happen. And I'm like, but we never saw that in the movies. So maybe that took place between 1 and 3. In the first 3 movies, they never told us that them being together created this force to be reckoned with, essentially. They just suggested that that's what happened in this movie.
Right.
And that's what didn't make any sense.
But keep in mind, in the first movie, when Neo gets shot at the end and is about to die, or actually has died, and she kisses him, he comes back to life.
True.
So there is that.
You see glimpses of it. I don't know. That got me thinking too, when again, going back to what the analyst said, quietly yearning for what you don't have while dreading what you lose, or dreading losing what you do have. It's easy to get comfortable in life and just kind of go, there's a lot going on in our world right now that's not fun, but I don't want to lose the nice comforts that I have right now living in America. And so just let me bury my head in the sand. So they really did do a really amazing job of, in my opinion, this was like almost the perfect iteration of the Matrix thus far, which I thought was cool. So they put a lot of good thought into that.
Yeah, I agree. And that reminds me of another good point. Remember, I was having trouble finding good points earlier on in this conversation. One of the things that I found very satisfying with this movie was that they had some really good philosophical discussions.
Yeah.
Especially when the analyst was on screen. That kind of harkened back to the original movie, where Agent Smith would philosophize with Morpheus and Neo.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated that because the things they said, that it bears some thought. But yeah, they did a lot of that in this movie as well. So that was a plus.
Yeah, I would agree. You ever stood and stared at it, marveled at its beauty?
I've always really appreciated the analogy of the human race to a virus. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that perspective, because when you look at it from Agent Smith's perspective in the movie and how he describes humanity, it's totally true. Obviously, we're not a virus, but humanity as a whole behaves a lot like a virus does.
Yeah.
So, I've always appreciated that.
The more I think about this, because when I first watched it, my initial thought, I said this, I enjoyed it, but was it necessary to make this movie? My first thought was not at all. But then I kept thinking, maybe it will open up the doors for movies 5 and 6, to complete an additional trilogy, but the more we're talking about this, the more I'm like, we weren't bombarded with as many movies when the first Matrix came out and TV shows,
Right.
You had a few blockbuster hits per summer. That was about it. You weren't 50 movies in a year. Well, 50 movies, probably about 50 big movies in a year you got to go see, you know, plus all the TV shows. And it's like your watch list is so long you can't even catch up anymore.
Yeah, nowadays.
So I look at that and I don't know. The more I think about this, the more I feel like we're not paying attention enough, because some of the stuff you brought up from that synopsis, rewatching it a second time. I mean, I pay attention to movies, but then I'm realizing I didn't catch half that stuff.
Right.
Well, why not? Well, because I'm probably bombarded and overbombed. There you go. I like that. It's like overloaded and bombarded, you know, overstimulated. Overbombed. There's too much going on. So in some ways, I'm starting to think now that this movie was actually necessary. Well, I don't know about necessary, but it can be necessary. And I actually do think that it can further the story. And I think there's a lot more depth there than we're honestly aware of in a first watch. So I'm going to read the synopsis. I'm going to go watch it a second time and see what else, you know, see if I missed anything. And that's interesting. You know, let it spawn some cool discussions. That's the thing I've always liked about the Matrix movies. They've spawned really, really good discussions. I think in some ways they've kind of challenged us to kind of think about, like you said, do we live like a virus? Yeah. Why? Well, let's stop doing that. You know, let's let that challenge us a little bit. Let's do some. So I think that this could go somewhere. And I think if they have a fifth and a sixth movie to help kind of complete the story, it might be able to forgive and maybe redeem some of those things that they didn't do quite right in this movie. But you still can't deny that it just wasn't as good of a movie in general. It wasn't filmed as well. There wasn't as much fighting. It could have been better. It wasn't written as well, even though I think there's still an interesting thing behind it. So, because I kept saying, like, is this just a cash grab? Or is there actually some cool purpose that we're missing that's going to really, you know, blow us away when the fifth and sixth ones come out? I don't know.
Honestly, I never have to see this movie again. But if you read that synopsis and digest everything that supposedly happens in the movie, this film, it does have a place in the Matrix anthology. However, you know, from watching it, it felt like it was done simply to cash in on nostalgia. So, I mean, really, the biggest failure in this film, in my opinion, was just that they did not do a good enough job communicating all the nuances of why they're making this film in the story. So the fact that it takes a detailed synopsis to glean all that is a failure, is a failing in my opinion. So
yeah, I would agree with that, because I think, you know, you look back at some of the movies that we've had incredible discussions over in past years. There was enough in a first watch to create that discussion. Yes. And then when you went back for a second watch, or as you're having that discussion you started to realize, ooh, there's even more here that I didn't even see in the first watch. And it just made it that much better and better and better. Right. With this, my initial first watch was cool. Had fun. It wasn't awesome. It wasn't necessary. But, you know, you found something that gives us a lot more that I go, oh, well, I didn't see that. That wasn't communicated to me, like you said. Yeah. Why do I need a synopsis written by some guy, which hopefully is accurate? Maybe it's not. I don't know. But why do I need that?
I'm guessing it's probably mostly accurate. Yeah.
Sure. But why do any of us need that kind of a synopsis?
Right.
In order to be able to appreciate the movie more. So you're right about that. Like they did fail on a lot of parts, I think. And so, you know, if we look at the movie, if we step back and look at the movie from an initial watch, it's an okay movie. It's enjoyable. It's fun. You know, don't spend a lot of money going to see it. If you're a Matrix fan, totally recommend it, just because it's part of the universe. You know, why not?
Yeah.
But is it a movie that you need to, you know, I'm sure most of you already seen it, you know, but it's like, if you haven't already, it's kind of like, well, you know, do you need to? No. They could have done better. They should have done better.
Watch it very carefully. Listen to everything that's said. Really absorb it as you're watching it. I see, because like you said earlier, in our culture now, we're so used to just riding that floating, you know, that inner tube on the lazy river or whatever ride. We're just kind of used to letting it all flow through us or flow around us. But this movie it apparently does require a lot more attention than what we're used to paying in movies recently. So,
which is kind of nice. I'm getting a little tired of the movies that just kind of turn your brain off and just sit there for, you know, nonstop eye candy action. You know, I want to think. I actually want to have some good challenge in movies. I want depth to them. I enjoyed those. You know, they make some of the best conversations, and It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that might be a good lesson that this movie is going to teach us, is that the culture lately, the pop culture, is just don't make people think too hard about it. I mean, that's just the undeniable thrust of entertainment lately. Don't make people think too hard about it.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a problem that we all have.
And again, so this is coming from a unique perspective. I did not read the Lord of the Rings books, as I mentioned before seeing the movies. I have not read the Wheel of Time books, and I watched that TV show. When I watched, and this is just from the movies' perspectives, when I watched Lord of the Rings, it spawned forth a lot of discussion. You had to pay attention. Did you notice that Legolas was the only one walking on the snow? You know, everyone else was below. There was so much that you really had to kind of dive into, for example, with all three of those movies. And you just kind of went, wow, I didn't realize that. And it's just like, we still talk about those movies 20 years later, and you still go, I missed that. I didn't realize that. Well, then I go and I watched Wheel of Time. Take it at face value. There's no depth. There's nothing else. Now, granted, this has nothing to do with the books. This is just what I saw on the show. It was fine. It was entertaining. I didn't miss anything. And I'm pretty sure I didn't. There's just, because they didn't challenge me as a viewer, they didn't give me anything other than just the basics. You know, it's like sugar to me. Wheel of Time felt like sugar, and Lord of the Rings felt like substance. Even though I liked Wheel of Time, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if you compare that, it's the same thing here. Like, well, actually, I'm not sure. This is one of those, either we didn't miss anything or we missed a lot. And that's still one of those, I'm not sure yet. I want to read the synopsis, rewatch the movie, give my opinion at that point.
You missed a lot. I guarantee you'll learn. You'll learn a lot of things in the synopsis and again, it all makes sense. So
that's cool.
I don't feel like the guy was pulling a bunch of stuff out of his butt on that. So
good.
Yeah, it's quite good. So I would recommend it highly.
I love it. All right. Well, let us know what you thought about the movie. And of course, you can put your comments, man. Put your comments below. I'd love to hear what your thoughts were. I've read all kinds of mixed reviews. I've read people who just absolutely loved the movie, thought it was great. They thought it was better than Matrix 3 and Matrix 2, actually. I've heard others that said this was horrible. It couldn't have been worse. Why did we need this? You know, what a cash grab. I've seen stuff in the middle. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, our opinions are our opinions, and that's it. It's just our perspective. We just wanted to share our thoughts and spark some discussion. So let us know what your thoughts are in the comments below. But if you've never checked out our Friday episodes, which comes out every Friday, it's the Real Brian Show on Fridays. It's a hodgepodge. It's a variety show. We have fun. It's like the Friday mashup, you know, end the week right, shoot the breeze. It's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of positive fun. Come join us. We talk about a lot of different things over there. We'd love to have you. But thanks for joining us here on the first edition of TRB Reviews here on the Real Brian Show.
Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and support us on Patreon.
Yeah, if you liked what we did here, put a like on there, a thumbs up, tell us what you'd love us to do more of. And like I said, this is the first one. So we'd love good feedback, constructive feedback, please. Keep it respectful. If you think, hey, you guys did this not so good, let us know. We'd love to hear it so we can improve. But thank you. Have a great rest of your day. But thanks for joining us here.